as we continue our town hall special on education in Wyoming, since this is going to look different going into the fall. We have 3 superintendents with us from school districts across Wyoming. That includes Boyd Brown from Laramie County, Dr. Jubal Yennie from Albany County, Mike Jennings from Natrona County, and I'll let Nick launch in with the first question.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us again. Sure glad to have you on the program. Mr. Jennings, I want to start with you and just go immediately off script, which I know everybody loves, but I want to talk about the graduation ceremonies up at the event center last night. We had a reporter up there covering that. I saw a lot of photos that were very much not social distancing. You know, we just had Superintendent of Public Instruction Jillian Balo on the program in the last hour, and she talked about the new normal, what it's going to look like when we reopen school buildings in the fall. Social distancing, sanitization procedures are going to be a big part of that. And so, I mean, last night, what happened at the graduation ceremony, are we going to have to be more rigorous than that in Natrona County when we reopen schools in the fall?
Well, good morning, Nick, and I do enjoy your question immediately going off script, so we'll start with that.
Yeah, everybody likes that, so thank you for playing ball.
You betcha. So we had 2 graduations last night, one of them at Midwest, and that graduation ceremony was very well done by Principal Tobin and followed all the guidelines and social distancing. Last night, a very large graduation, Kelly Walsh High School. It was modified. It was outside. Natrona County was able to work with a variety of agencies in order to secure the screens so we could do somewhat of a drive-in theater format that I thought went very well. But what you described and what you've noticed is I know our families, when you looked at them, you know, they were in family groups. And so there were family people very tightly close together, and they were in their parking spots, they were in their vehicles, and they were around their vehicles. But we really worked hard with communicating to the public as far as having family groups. So you did see people in proximity, a significantly large crowd. And when you do that, it is difficult to social distance to the level we can. We worked hard to control the areas for which we could, which was our staff, and we really communicated with our parents and community to take the guidelines very seriously to help ebb the pandemic and the spread of it. But again, as you stated earlier, the large number of people in the parking lot, family groups, and there was some movement around. So that was difficult, and we'll continue to refine that.
Well, and sir, when it comes to the fall and reopening schools, what kind of procedures are you going to take? And to the point you just made, how difficult is it going to be to implement those procedures if you have some folks, and this is more of an assumption than evidence, but maybe who aren't going to take them as seriously as others?
Great question. Yes, we are planning on opening schools in this summer and fall with our reopening plan, and it'll be in accordance with local and state guidelines. One thing that's dramatically different with schools and the opening of schools is a much more controlled environment. Last night in interacting with the community in a large setting, the event center parking lot, it looks a lot different than when you are in school. Schools are much easier to control, and we're going to follow those guidelines reopening this summer and in the fall.
Very good. And sorry, go ahead.
Let me jump up to Boyd Brown real quick from Laramie County because we have a listener question. Are you planning to open up this fall like some other school districts are talking about? And from the listener, if so, by what time do you have to have your plan ready to submit? What does that look like? Big question, I know. Let's go broad here.
Oh, I appreciate that. We do plan to open in the fall, and it's going to be dependent on what stage we are in the pandemic. I see us looking at about 3 different buckets. You're going to have a health and safety bucket that school districts and people may not have much of a control over. That may drive exactly what we're going to have to do. We may not have much choice in that. We're going to have the education bucket. We'll have a lot more control over that locally. And then there'll be a combined bucket in the middle where we're going to have to work with our local and state health officials to make some decisions about what we can do. And it's going to depend on where we're at in the pandemic stage. We've been talking about a lot of different scenarios, whether we would open up from 100% of our students coming back to 75, 50%, 25, and how that would look. It's really going to be dependent on where we're at. There's a lot of information about round 2 of the pandemic possibly coming. There's talk about maybe being able to get a vaccine out there. So there's a lot of unknowns out there. So we have a lot of scenarios that we're planning for, and we will probably have to know right around the first part of August kind of where we're at and what phase as to how we're going to begin the school year and work on planning on that. So there's not a real solid answer on this is exactly how we're going to do it. We've got about 3 or 4 different things, scenarios that we're looking at, and we'll continue to refine those just like everyone else is. We're working, with the Wyoming Department of Education. They're putting together a template for us that we'll be looking at. Plan to meet with our county health officials here fairly quickly and have some conversations with them. But there's no roadmap. There's no one set way to do it. I think it's going to be dependent on what phase we're at, and that could be different in different counties across the state. There are still a few counties out there, I believe, that have only had 1 or 2 or maybe even 0 cases of the virus in their county.
Now, Superintendent Yennie down in Albany County, same question, sir. How are you approaching the question of whether to reopen in the fall, and how's that shaping up? I imagine things are still in flux for you as well.
But yeah, most definitely. Nick, good hearing from you. And I think Boyd Brown kind of hit it. That's really where we are. We're right in the middle of this whole conversation. Is if you take a look at kind of a model is where we are with the county and state health officers and what's happening with the pandemic. We have no control over that. Obviously, we have to respond to that. So, the question is, are we going to reopen in the fall? Yes, most definitely. We're putting together. We have 6 task force right now that are currently working on cross-functional responses to this. My plan is to have something put together before the end of June, something over to the board in early July, so that we can communicate to our families and our students and our teachers somewhere. And I think that August 1st date is exactly right, so that we can communicate. Here's how we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. And again, there's going to be several scenarios that if you have this particular structure, what happens there, and it is a little uncertain. I mean, that uncertainty has been kind of one of those things that we've been working from last March, but we definitely have some very good plans put together. And what we're focusing, primarily is the education piece, the learning recovery piece, and a very important part of that is also this remote learning piece. People are a little concerned about it for the most part, but it may be part of what we need to do going forward.
Well, and you hit exactly what my next question was going to be. I mean, I'm fairly familiar with the schools that you have down in Albany County, and certainly some that are very rural. And so on the question of distance learning, virtual education, what's the infrastructure in place there for those students? Has that been enough in terms of broadband internet access to really make that distance education effective for students and those families?
Well, certainly not 100%. And I think, we did a great job of getting devices out and internet access to as many people as we possibly could. There were some people that chose not to, or we could not get broadband access. And I was glad to hear, the state of Wyoming is working on that particular issue, because I think that will become one of the things that we will rely on, certainly in the near future, but, in the distant future as well. Mm-hmm. So, it wasn't, it didn't manifest itself as a huge problem. We were all able to overcome some of that issue in making sure that we were connecting with families in a lot of different ways. And that was one of our hallmarks of our plan early on, was relationships and equity. So, yes, we had a solution, but there's a better way to do this as well.
On the phone with us, and some listener questions coming in. So let's start with Mike Jennings, who's the school superintendent in Natrona County. One of the questions here, you have some staff members that, of course, are reaching that age, which is considered to be an at-risk age. Some of them maybe even getting near retirement. One of the listeners wanted to know. So what are you doing? Is there any plan to help them be a little bit safer? I mean, do you take extra precautions for them? That was Carol Lee asking that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we've been working very diligently with our local health officials as far as what is the health screening going to look like this summer and in the fall as students and staff re-enter our building. And we do work with our staff very closely, wanting to keep them safe as well as our students. So we'll take a variety of things into consideration as far as what Superintendent Brown and Superintendent Yennie have described. Is there's a variety of educational modalities for summer and fall with brick and mortar classrooms, virtual learning. So our goal is to get our staff in the position to serve students as they have done while taking the precautions to keep them safe. And there's a variety of precautions from cleaning, disinfecting, social distancing, protective PPE that we can have our staff and students wear as needed, and will adjust as health guidelines adjust. So, yeah, we are very concerned about the health and safety of our students and our staff. And we as stated earlier, with the reopening plans, one of the primary objectives is opening safely and doing everything we can to mitigate COVID-19.
Dr. Jubal Yennie is the superintendent in Albany County. Nathan and Douglas would like to know, is there any idea how long masks and social distancing would be in effect? And I'd like to throw in the question on top of Nathan's question, how do you keep a bunch of kids in the hallways socially distanced?
Great question. I think the answer to the first question is how long we're going to be using, PPE or face coverings and those things. That question really becomes up to the health officers, and as we take those directions from not only state and county health officers, is because that's what we're responding to from that standpoint. As we take a look at the news, we had that uncertainty here for the next 6 months, 18 months, and we'll have to adjust to that. Social distancing, and I think Superintendent Jennings hit it right on the head, because the issue is we have controlled environments. We can create compartmentalized locations in our buildings. For instance, you can create one-way hallways. You can be able to make sure that you're limiting movement in classrooms as well as buildings and providing different entrances. So all of those things come into play as we are limiting movement to help us provide that social distancing, which is one of the effective tools that we're finding to reduce the spread of coronavirus.
Now, I'd like to go to Superintendent Brown, and really a question for everybody, but let's start with you, Mr. Brown. As far as the adaptation with the distance learning in light of this pandemic and the school closures, are there some things that you've learned or some things that you've implemented that maybe you would want to carry forward, when schools do reopen and things kind of get into this new normal? Obviously, there have been some difficulties, but have you seen some successes and some things that you think would benefit to carry on long term?
We actually have, and we don't have a true virtual program in Laramie County currently, Laramie County School District number 1. And we are looking at standing up a virtual program in the fall, so that there are some people that are immune compromised, some students out there that don't feel like they can come back, some people that are feeling like they still need to have some more time at home, that we have that totally virtual option for some people. We're also looking at being able to stand up a school if we need. If we have somebody come down with the virus at one of our schools, we know that we're going to have to shut it down and clean it for a couple days, and then being able to do that remote learning and being able to attack that very quickly at that school, that we'll be able to do that. We have some teachers and some students that were very successful doing remote learning, whether it was some of the packet work that they did or whether it was totally virtual online. We use Canvas, which is the state provided instruction platform for us, and we had some staff members who really did an excellent job in that. So we're looking at them to help us stand up some things to be able to do some virtual stuff. So yeah, we learned a lot of lessons, a lot of good things came out of this. We really had a lot of staff members that may not have had a good background in technology and virtual education, did a great job of learning online and then being able to try to deliver their instruction online and doing the assessment. Was it exactly the way we would like it? No, we always would prefer to have that relationship and kids in school so that we can see their eyes and see what they're doing. But we learned a lot of good things and feel like our staff members did a great job of trying to stand up a virtual education and remote education program in about 2 weeks.
And Dr. Yennie, same question. Any successes that might have some longevity for the instruction in Albany County?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Nick. Real quickly, I think it's the what they call social emotional learning, or the mental wellness procedures and processes we put in place to develop those relationships. We had a lot of success with the communication from school to home, and we will be able to build on that relationship that was created through those connections virtually. But when we're able to get back in person, we can even provide even greater response to that. We're also adding a position of this director of health wellness and mental wellness, not only for staff and for students, because we do know that is going to be a significant issue ongoing for not only for students but staff and families. So we're just going to build on that. We've had some success in that. We'll build on that as well as the other piece that Boyd just talked about.
And Mr. Jennings, how about a not curveball question for you? Same one.
Yeah, again, thank you. I think Superintendent Brown and Superintendent Yennie answered the question very similar to that I would. We've had some great successes, continued relationships with students and teachers. It's not the same as having kids in the classroom. I think we had very strong communication. Natrona County has an established virtual program, Natrona County Virtual. That program was successful. Staff worked very diligently to shift to the remote learning platform. We're in the process of developing a survey of our community that'll be going out either today or early next week that really engages our community and asks them what went well on your end and what helped and what was a barrier to remote learning as we enter the summer and fall. And we had good success with Canvas as well and Google Classroom, and really focused now on preparing teachers for virtual learning or remote learning potentially in the fall, depending on where we're headed.
And real quickly, I'd like to get a take from each of you on the question of extracurricular activities. We've talked a lot about classroom instruction, kids in the halls, what that looks like. How do you get something like a varsity football team back up and running, considering locker rooms and the nature of that sport? Mr. Jennings, we'll start with you.
Sure. I know that Ron Laird with the Wyoming High School Activity Association is working with athletic directors and with public and state health officials to answer that very question as far as what are the guidelines that are going to be in place from local health officials in order to, what are they going to be in place and what are they going to look like when our students return to competition and extracurricular activities. So those questions are being asked and plans are being put in place right now by Wyoming High School and our local athletic directors and the high school principals as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. And so it really is going to depend on what the situation is in the fall, and probably the same for you, Dr. Yennie.
Exactly. I guess the other thing that we're watching very carefully is the University of Wyoming is returning next week as well, their athletes. And so we're pretty frequent communication with folks over there at the university, so we'll get some lessons as well for how they're able to deal with that.
I hate to cut us off right here, but we're running out of time coming up on a commercial break. Boyd Brown, Laramie County Superintendent, Dr. Jubal Yennie, and Mike Jennings from Albany County and Natrona County. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on and clarifying all this for us.
Thank you all very much.